part of the discussion where we will discuss reader response theory, and especially whereas the questions which are asked by readers, they will also be a part of this reader response theory. Before this we have discussed that text is not the source of meaning, that writer is not the source of meaning. According to this theory, reader is the source of meaning. It means that reader is the person who is going to give the actual meaning to a text. Reader is at the center. So the question is asked by a reader because reader is going to interpret the meanings of a text. So when he goes through a piece of literature, so different type of questions are always present in his mind. So the very first question is, what strikes you about story? Because after going through a story, the story is a combination of different characters, different situations, different stylistic devices. Then there is beginning, middle and end. It can be open-ended, it can be closed-ended. So what strikes you about the story means that what comes into the mind of the reader after going through a piece of literature, after going through a story. This is called, because the thing which strikes the reader, that is very important, because that is the thing which helps in understanding the meaning of a text. Then what did you notice? Whereas this concept is concerned, notice means that how did you come to know, or what you have observed about this, that how the story is going to start, whether it has a proper beginning, middle or end, or it is it's going to start in an abrupt manner. Characters are valid over there. What type of characters are there? From which class of society they have been taken, they are used, and how they are dealt with. And whatever you have noticed about that story, that is also a part of reader response. So the third one is, what would you like to talk about after reading? Mean that when you have gone through a piece of literature and you have read a piece of literature thoroughly, what would you like to talk about? Because a person, when he goes through a piece of literature, the very first thing which he talks about, the very first thing that strikes his mind, the very first thing that that is noticed by the reader, is that he likes to talk about that thing. When he likes to talk about that thing, for example, he can talk about a piece of literature, that this is such type of genre, its story is complicated, its story is open-ended, its characters are from that strata of life, or its themes, it is related to life. That is also a part of this. Then what issues did it raise for you? Because this is the very first stage. This stage is usually called enigma stage. That when you are going to a piece of literature, different type of issues. These can be social issues, political issues, moral issues, economical issues, religious issues. Different types of issues can be raised in different types of pieces of literature. So what is the issue? That issue is the central part of that piece of literature. So this is also the duty of a reader to know about it. Then were these points that confuse you? Were there points? Because when you are going to a piece of literature, there are certain things, certain characters, certain settings, certain ideas which confuse the reader. So if you are confused by those things, it means that you will have to deal with that confusion. Then what question do you have? After going through a piece of literature, different type of questions come into your mind. So it depends upon the questions which are raised by a reader, that he can interpret that piece of literature in an authentic manner. Because raising of a question, when questions are raised by a piece of literature, it means that that piece of literature is challenging the reader. And when a reader is going to be challenged, the output is the different type of questions, and now we will try to give answer to those questions. Then did anything upset you? Upset means that there are certain stories, sometimes setting upsets us, sometimes character setup disturb us, sometimes the abrupt introduction, abrupt start of the story disturbs us. If there is anything that is upsetting the reader, it means that he is going to resolve the issue and understand the meanings of a text. Then is there anything you want to ask about the characters? Not only about the character, but also about setting, also about different type of meanings which are used, different type of words, different type of sentences, different type of narratology, how the environment is used, what type of ecology is being used, and what type of characters are involved. So if you want to ask any question about this, this is also part of a reader's going through a piece of literature. Then how did you feel after reading? How did you feel after reading mean that a story can be pessimistic? Because if a story is pessimistic, you feel pessimistic. If it is optimistic, one starts feeling optimistic. If it is horror story, so one starts feeling that there's something terrifying over there. It can be from science fiction. It can be about any topic. So what are the feelings just after reading a piece of literature? This is also a part of this theory, and what influences you to interpret it, because reader is an interpreter. A text is nothing according to this theory until there is not a reader, because a reader is the person who is going to build, interpret or give meaning to that text. So there are certain elements, there is characterization, there is setting, there is plot, there is beginning, middle and end, there are ups and downs, there are intonation, there is tone, rhyme, rhythm, meter, and then there are different types of stylistic devices are used there. So all these things mold the personality of a person. Now a reader is himself also involved in that piece of literature. His personal emotions, his personal feelings, his social background, his cultural background, his political, economical background, his religious background, each and everything is in the mind of the reader when he is going to interpret. So a text is also going to tell him about different type of emotions of the characters, their cultural background, their social background, their moral background, their ethical background, their religious background. Now there are countless backgrounds of the, not only of the characters which are involved in the piece of literature, but the emotions, feelings of the reader are also important. So whether he is going to have that thing that's called transactional type of reading, whether it is stylistic affective reading, or it is something subjective type of, it is psychological reading. So whatever is the type of reading, there are certain things which help the reader to mold the meanings of, to mold him to interpret a piece of literature in different manner from the other readers. So this is very important, that what are the factors which influence the reader to interpret in a manner. So these are the questions which are part of the reader when he is going to be involved in the understanding a text. So then there are differences, different type of differences between reader response theory and traditional method of reading. So whereas reader response theory is concerned, it means that when time changes and when space changes, reader changes. So suppose there is a text and there are 10,000 readers, so there must be 10,000 interpretations. So countless readers, countless interpretations. So the reader response theory enhances ideas. Enhances ideas mean that every reader is going to interpret by keeping in his mind or her mind the situations of his or her personal life. So many readers, so many enhancements of ideas. And whereas traditional method of reading is concerned, so teacher tells us that this is the method, this is the meaning. So those meanings are single meaning. And whereas the writer response theory is concerned, or author based theory is concerned, or that's also called expressive realism, there the meanings are also single meanings, because author is the source of meanings. So meanings are static, meanings are not dynamic. Then this theory is depending upon students. It's student dependent, this is teacher dependent. Student dependent means countless students, so multiple interpretations. Teacher dependent means that there is just one teacher, so whatever he is telling, that is valid. Then students become tolerant, and tolerant means that when they are going to interpret, they can tolerate. Tolerant means that it increases their mental level. A text reading of a text, reading of a drama, novel, short story, it makes the readers tolerant, because they are going to interpret a piece of literature by keeping in mind his or her own mental abilities. So students become tolerant. Then there are multiple interpretations in reader response theory, and this is the most important thing. And then better critical reading, because the reader himself or herself is going to interpret, so his mind becomes critical, he can critically evaluate a piece of literature, he can understand the meanings according to his own background. So this is the real thing that's called better critical reading. And then here, this thing, traditional method of reading, it discourages enhancement of ideas and no practice of mind. Here there is practice of mind. And then whereas this reader response is concerned, it means the reader response is very much important. Its place, its importance cannot be negated. So whereas techniques of readings are concerned, number one, there is experiencing. Experiencing, now this can be dealt at two levels. The first one is there is the experience of the reader, experiences of the reader, his life, his background, everything that is he is keeping in his mind, that is also an experience thing. And experiencing means when he goes through a piece of literature, he experiences the experiences which are part of that piece of literature, because there are characters, human beings are there in a piece of literature, so he is also a character, he is also a man, he is also a human being. So there is some going to happen, something interaction between, so he is experiencing their experiences. And the second thing is hypothesizing. Hypothesizing means that he thinks that why these characters are behaving in such a manner, why these characters are thinking in such a manner, what is special with them, what's wrong with them, why these characters are going to be molded naturalistic, and they're interpreted in a naturalistic manner, or they are going to be interpreted in a realistic manner. So this is called hypothesizing, that he tries to understand through hypothesis. He makes hypothesis that these can be the meanings of a piece of literature. And then he can think that if this is the meaning of literature, this can also be a meaning of literature. It means that through hypothesizing, meanings of a piece of literature vary at the advanced stage. Even a single reader can have so many interpretations. And then there is exploring. Exploring means that to try to know the real meanings of a text. Explore means what is type of characterization, how these characters help in molding the meanings of what is the relationship of this piece of literature with life. So this is called exploring. And the final thing is synthesizing. Synthesizing means that there is involvement of different issues, there is involvement of different characters, there are different types of setting, there are different type of cultural background, there are different type of social backgrounds. So in a piece of literature, that there are also these types of things are involved, and when these are involved, the reader's purpose is to create the connection between this piece of literature and that thing which is called life, because the purpose of a piece of literature is to tell meanings, purpose of a piece of literature with reference to life. So this is all about reader response theory, and whereas this reader response theory is concerned, it's very important. It's important, cannot be negated, because reader is a person who completes a book. Because when we ask a book, who completes you, who gives you meaning, who increases your worth, who evaluates you, who criticizes you, who analyzes you, the answer will be again same and same, that it is the reader who completes me. This is the answer of a book. So reader response theory means that reader is the interpreter, meaning lie with reader. So reader is very much important, and because all the writings are for a reader, so reader is the source of meaning.